Captain Taemin stood on the bridge of his patrol ship, watching the stars shift as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. New Busan should have appeared on the screen by now, bright and green like Earth's old cities. Instead, he saw only darkness. "Sir, I'm not picking up any signals from the colony," Lieutenant Yuna said from her station. Her young face showed confusion. "Not alarm. Not yet. Run a diagnostic on the sensors," Taemin ordered. Maybe it's interference from the nebula, but he knew better. In 20 years of service, his gut had never been wrong. Something was very wrong. The ship moved closer, and the darkness began to take shape. What should have been lights from homes and factories was now just smoke. Thick, black smoke rising from the planet's surface like a funeral shroud. "Oh God," Yuna whispered. Taemin felt his chest tighten. New Busan was home to 847 people. Farmers, teachers, engineers. Families who had left Earth to build something new under alien stars. He knew some of them personally. He had attended the colony's opening ceremony 5 years ago. "Get me a scan of the surface. All frequencies," he said, his voice steady despite the ice in his veins. The next hour was the longest of Taemin's life. They sent down drones. They searched for survivors. They found none. Every building had been destroyed. The school, the hospital, the residential sectors all reduced to burning rubble. The attack had been systematic and thorough. When the landing team finally went down in protective suits, they found the bodies. Men, women, children. Some had been running. Some had been hiding. None had been spared. Yuna threw up twice before she stopped looking at the video feeds. Even the hardened Marines on the landing team worked in silence, their faces pale behind their helmets. "Sir, we found the colony's data core," the team leader reported. "It survived in the underground bunker. Downloading now." Taemin watched as the information streamed across his screen. Security footage, communications logs, sensor readings. The story came together piece by piece, and each piece made his blood run colder. The Vrakith Empire had done this. Their ships had appeared without warning 3 days ago. They had demanded the colony surrender all trade goods as compensation for some imagined slight. The colonists had tried to explain they were under Earth's protection, that there were proper channels for trade disputes. The Vrakith response had been to open fire. The footage showed Vrakith soldiers walking through the streets, methodical in their destruction. They had targeted the school first. Taemin watched children running, screaming. He forced himself to keep watching. Someone had to witness this. Someone had to remember. "They didn't want resources," Yuna said quietly, reading the analysis. "They didn't take anything. This was just murder. A demonstration." Taemin looked at the final transmission from the colony administrator. A woman named Ji Woo. Someone he had met. Someone who had shown him pictures of her daughter. Her last message was simple. "Tell Earth what happened here. Don't let them negotiate this away. Please." He stood in the ruins of what had been a classroom. The walls were scorched black. Small desks lay twisted and melted. Among the debris, he found a child's toy, a stuffed rabbit, half-burned but still recognizable. His daughter had one just like it back on Earth. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Ambassador Hee-jin," the communications officer called out. "She's on the council station." They've heard about the attack. Taemin climbed back to his ship, the toy still in his hand. He took the call in his ready room, where the crew couldn't see his face. Ambassador Hee-jin appeared on the screen. She was a skilled diplomat, someone who had spent 15 years building bridges between humanity and the other species in the Galactic Council. Right now, she looked tired. "Taemin, I've seen the preliminary reports," she said. "This is terrible, unforgivable. But I need you to understand something. The Council has protocols for situations like this." "Situations like this?" Taemin repeated. His voice was quiet, dangerous. "You mean the murder of 847 civilians?" "I mean conflicts between member species," Hee-jin said carefully. "The Vrakith will be called to the Council. There will be mediation, They'll have to pay compensation and issue apologies. We can get justice through proper channels. Taemin looked down at the burned toy in his hands. Justice? They're going to apologize and pay money? And that's justice? It's how the galaxy works, Haijin said. Every species has had conflicts. The Council has been maintaining peace for 10,000 years, through mediation and negotiation. If we break those protocols, we risk everything we've built. They killed children, Ambassador. They targeted schools. Haijin closed her eyes. I know. Believe me, I know. But if we respond with military force, we'll be the ones breaking Council law. We'll be isolated, sanctioned, maybe even expelled from the Council entirely. We have to think about Earth's place in the galaxy. Taemin was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was very calm. Send me the official response from the Vrakith Empire. Haijin transmitted the file. Taemin opened it and read. The Vrakith claimed the colony had been harboring economic saboteurs. They offered 10 million credits in compensation and a formal statement of regret for excessive response to criminal activity. 10 million credits, divided by 847 lives. That made each human life worth about 11,000 credits. A child's life, a teacher's life, a farmer's life, 11,000 credits each. Captain, what are you thinking? Haijin asked, concerned by his silence. Taemin looked up at the screen. I'm thinking about what humanity promised ourselves after the last World War. After all the camps and the bombs and the mass graves, we said, never again. We meant it. Taemin, I need a secure channel to Fleet Admiral Jiho, not through Council networks. Direct Earth military encryption. You can't. I'm sending him everything. Every image, every video, every piece of data. And then I'm going to let the people who actually make decisions decide how humanity responds to this. Haijin stared at him. You're asking for war? No. Taemin said. I'm asking if we're still the species that means it. When we say, never again. Or if that was just something we said when the monsters were our own. He ended the call before she could respond. He spent the next hour writing his report. He didn't editorialize. He didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. 847 humans murdered for no reason except to send a message. Children targeted first to maximize terror. He attached every image, every video, every scrap of evidence. Then he sent it directly to Earth's Security Council with a single recommendation. The Galactic Council will tell us to negotiate. I recommend we tell the Council, and the Vrakith, that humanity doesn't negotiate with child murderers. Not now. Not ever. As he waited for the response, Taemin stood in that burned classroom one more time. He placed the toy rabbit carefully on what had been a teacher's desk. I promise you'll be remembered, he said to the empty room. All of you. And I promise they won't get away with this. His communicator buzzed. A message from Earth. Just 3 words from Fleet Admiral Jiho. Prepare for deployment. Taemin smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. The Grand Conclave Station was older than human civilization. It hung in neutral space, a massive structure built by species long gone, maintained by the collective will of 47 different civilizations. Ambassador Haijin had walked its ancient corridors hundreds of times. But today they felt different. Today they felt like the halls of a courthouse where the jury had already decided the verdict. She entered the council chamber, and every eye, and there were many different kinds of eyes, turned to watch her. Some species had multiple eyes, some had none at all but sensed her anyway. All of them were judging. Counselor Thane floated in his liquid-filled sphere, his tentacles moving in patterns that Haijin had learned to read over the years. Right now, they showed careful neutrality. The Pelurian had been a mediator for 300 years. He had settled wars that spanned solar systems. He believed in the process. Ambassador Haijin, he said through his translator. Please present your species' grievance. Our grievance. Such a small word for mass murder. Haijin activated her presentation. The center of the chamber filled with images from New Busan. She didn't narrate. She didn't need to. The pictures spoke clearly enough. Burned homes, bodies, the school, She heard gasps from some species. Others remained silent. The predator species, she noticed, showed no reaction at all. 847 human civilians were killed by Vrakith military forces. Hejin said simply, "We have complete documentation. We request the Council's immediate action." On the far side of the chamber, a hologram flickered to life. Warlord Kran of the Vrakith Empire appeared, his reptilian features showing what might have been amusement. The Vrakith looked almost like Earth's ancient dinosaurs, if those dinosaurs had survived and learned to build starships. The human colony was harboring criminals, Kran said casually. Economic saboteurs who violated trade agreements. We had every right to enforce compliance. You murdered children, Hejin said. Kran's translator rendered his response without emotion. Collateral damage in a law enforcement action. Regrettable but necessary. High Arbiter Vex, the ancient AI that served as the Council's judge, processed this for exactly 0.7 seconds. Warlord Kran, what compensation does the Vrakith Empire offer? 10 million credits and a formal apology for any excessive force used, Kran replied. Councillor Thane's tentacles moved in an approving pattern. A reasonable opening position. Ambassador Hejin, what counteroffer does humanity propose? This was the moment. The entire galaxy was watching. 47 civilizations, each with their own history of conflict and resolution, each believing in the process that had kept the peace for 10 millennia. They expected her to do what everyone always did: negotiate a number, settle on terms, move forward. Hejin's communicator vibrated. A message from Earth, from Fleet Admiral Jiho himself. Negotiations are over. She took a breath. Humanity does not make a counteroffer, she said clearly. We demand Warlord Kran be remanded to human custody for trial. We demand the Vrakith Empire surrender all officers involved in the New Busan massacre. You have 48 hours to comply. Quote, the chamber erupted. Dozens of species began speaking at once, their translators creating a chaos of sound. Some were shocked. Some were outraged. The predator species were suddenly very interested. Councillor Thane raised his sphere higher, signaling for silence. It took several minutes to achieve. Ambassador, he said carefully, you cannot issue ultimatums to council members. This violates every protocol we have established. The mediation process. The mediation process is designed for disputes, Hejin interrupted. Trade disagreements, territorial conflicts, resource allocation. This is not a dispute. This is mass murder. The distinction is irrelevant, High Arbiter Vex stated. All conflicts between council species must be resolved through approved mediation channels. A new voice joined the conversation. Councillor Mora, a Delphinian whose species resembled Earth's whales if whales could survive in space, spoke quietly. Is it irrelevant? The human brings up an interesting point. When does a conflict become a crime? Crimes are subjective, another councillor argued. What one species considers criminal, another considers necessary. That's why we mediate, rather than judge. Hejin pulled up another file. I would like to call Dr. Subin to explain humanity's position. The council chamber fell silent as Dr. Subin's image appeared. She was an older woman, a xenopsychologist who had spent her career trying to bridge the gap between human and alien thinking. Councillors, Dr. Subin began, humanity has a different perspective on this because we have a unique history. We have been where many of you are now. We have fought wars. We have committed atrocities. We have tried to excuse the inexcusable with logic and necessity. She paused, making sure she had their attention. We learned something from our darkest times. We learned that some acts cannot be negotiated away, cannot be compensated with money, cannot be forgiven with apologies. The deliberate targeting of civilians, especially children, is one of those acts. We call it a crime against sapient life. And we will never again pretend that such crimes can be resolved with mediation. Primitive thinking, one of the predator species muttered. Perhaps, Doctor, Subin agreed. But it's thinking that stopped us from destroying ourselves. Your species never had a world war. You never built weapons that could end all life on your planet. You never had to look at the ashes of your own cities and decide what kind of species you wanted to be. We did. And we chose. Warlord Kran's hologram laughed. It was an ugly sound. You chose to be weak. The Vrakith Empire has 200 warships. How many does Earth have? 40? 50? Your threats are empty, human. Heijin felt her hands shaking. She kept them clasped behind her back where no one could see. We are not threatening. We are informing. You have 48 hours to surrender those responsible for the New Busan massacre. After that, humanity will take action. The Council will not permit military action, Councillor Thane said firmly. If you attack a Council member, you will be sanctioned. Isolated. Expelled from the Council entirely. Then that is Earth's choice to make, Heijin replied. High Arbiter Vex processed this new development. Ambassador, you must understand the consequences. Your species has been part of the galactic community for only 15 years. You rely on Council trade, technology, and protection. If you are expelled, for the Recycle, if we are expelled for refusing to negotiate with child murderers, then perhaps the Council is not a community we wish to be part of, Heijin said. The chamber went completely silent. Councillor Mora spoke again, softly. She means it. I've studied humans. When they speak like this, they mean it. Then they are fools, Warlord Kran declared. The Vrakith Empire will not surrender our officers to primitive savages. We will meet your pathetic fleet and crush it. Then we will file a formal complaint with the Council about human aggression. Heijin turned to face Kran's hologram directly. I want to make something very clear to everyone in this chamber. Humanity did not want this. We came to the stars hoping to leave our violent past behind. We believed in the Council. We believed in diplomacy. But we also believed in justice. She activated another display. This time it showed 847 faces, names, ages, occupations, families. These are the people you killed, she said to Kran. Not statistics. Not collateral damage. People. Min Jae, age 7, who wanted to be a scientist. Hana, age 42, a teacher. Jae-1, age 17, who had just been accepted to university. I'm going to show you every single one of them. For the next 14 minutes, Heijin displayed each victim. Their faces filled the chamber. Some counselors looked away. Some watched. The predator species seemed bored. When she finished, she turned back to the Council. You can sanction us. You can expel us. You can condemn our actions. But understand, this humanity will never, ever negotiate with those who murder children. We will never pretend that money can replace lives. We will never accept that might makes right. Idealistic nonsense, one counselor muttered. Maybe, Heijin agreed. But it's our nonsense, and we'll stand by it. The countdown began. 48 hours. The galaxy watched and waited. In her private quarters that night, Heijin received dozens of private messages. Some from species supporting humanity. More from species begging her to reconsider. A few from predator species making veiled threats. One message stood out. It was from Councillor Mora. Your species terrifies them, it read. Not because you're strong. Because you're willing to sacrifice everything for a principle. They don't understand that. Most species negotiate because it's practical. You refuse to negotiate because it's right. That kind of thinking changes galaxies. Or ends civilizations. I hope you know what you're doing. Heijin sat in the dark, thinking about New Busan, thinking about the children who would never grow up, thinking about the line humanity had drawn. She sent a message back to Earth. To Fleet Admiral Ji-ho. Just 4 words. They don't believe us. His response came 3 minutes later. They will. Fleet Admiral Ji-ho stood in Earth's war room, looking at the display that showed human forces scattered across 3 dozen star systems. At 72 years old, he had hoped to never see this room active again. His gray hair and the scars on his hands told the story of someone who had fought in humanity's last major conflict, the corporate wars that nearly destroyed Mars. "Status report," he said quietly. 40 warships are in position at the Vrakith border, his tactical officer reported. "They're holding at the designated coordinates. No hostile action. And the Vrakith? They've mobilized 150 ships. They're making a show of force, positioning along their side of the border. Warlord Kran has been broadcasting threats for the past 6 hours. Jiho smiled slightly. Let him talk. Across the room, Dr. Subin was giving a presentation to a group of council observers. She had volunteered to explain humanity's position to anyone who would listen. Most species had refused. A handful had sent representatives, more out of curiosity than support. "You have to understand our history," Subin was saying. "Humanity spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war. We got very, very good at killing each other. By the early 21st century, we had weapons that could destroy our entire planet multiple times over." One of the observers, a crystalline being from a species that reproduced by division, asked, "How did you survive?" "Barely," Subin admitted. "We had several close calls. But eventually, we learned something important. We learned that there are some lines that cannot be crossed, some acts that cannot be forgiven or forgotten. We established laws not just for our own people, but laws we applied to everyone. War crimes. Crimes against humanity. Genocide. But you're applying your laws to another species," the observer protested. "That's cultural imperialism." That. Subin pulled up an image of New Busan. "When someone deliberately murders children, that's not cultural difference. That's evil. And evil doesn't deserve negotiation. It deserves justice." "Your fleet is outnumbered," another observer noted. "The Vrakith have nearly 4 times your ships. Are you really willing to start a war you'll probably lose? If we were planning a conventional war, you'd be right," Subin said. "But we're not." She didn't elaborate. She couldn't. But Jiho knew the plan. The whole galaxy expected a fleet battle. Human ships against Vrakith ships, the kind of straightforward conflict that had happened 1,000 times in galactic history. They were going to be very surprised. The countdown continued. 24 hours remaining. Messages poured in from across Earth. Public opinion was divided. Half wanted the government to back down, to avoid a war that could leave Earth isolated and vulnerable. The other half demanded justice, no matter the cost. Jiho read them all. The angry ones, the scared ones. The ones from parents who couldn't imagine their children being murdered and then having their government negotiate with the murderers. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Yon Seo, a survivor of the corporate wars. She had lost her entire family when a corporate militia bombed a civilian shelter. "I lived because the government negotiated," she wrote. The corporation paid a fine. Their CEO gave a speech about regret. Everyone moved on. Except me. Except all of us who lost everything. Don't let New Busan become another negotiated settlement. Please. Some things are worth fighting for. Jiho saved that message. He would need it later, when people asked why humanity had taken such a hard stance. On the council station, Ambassador He Jin was facing increasing pressure. Species after species came to her privately, offering compromises. What if the Vrakith paid more? What if they surrendered some officers but not all? What if they agreed to a joint trial? Every time, she gave the same answer. No. Councillor Thane was particularly persistent. He had mediated conflicts for 3 centuries. He had never failed to find a compromise that satisfied all parties. "I don't understand," he told Hiejin during their 5th private meeting. "Warlord Kran has agreed to increase compensation to 50 million credits. He'll publicly apologize. He'll even allow human observers during an internal Vrakith investigation. These are significant concessions." "They're not enough," Hiejin said. "What more do you want?" "Justice." Thane's tentacles moved in frustration. "Justice is subjective. What your species calls justice, another might call revenge. That's why we mediate. We find the middle ground, where both sides can live with the outcome. Hai Jin looked at him directly. Can the dead live with the outcome? Can 847 murdered humans live with Warlord Kran remaining free and in power? The dead are gone, Thane said gently. We negotiate for the living, to prevent more death. If you attack the Vracath, thousands will die. Perhaps millions. Is that justice? It was a good question. A fair question. Hee-Jin had asked herself the same thing 100 times since New Busan. We're not going to attack the Vracath people, she said carefully. We're going to arrest the individuals responsible for mass murder. There's a difference. Your fleet is in position. Nothing more. Thane studied her. You really believe your species can do this? Arrest Vracath military officers without triggering a full war? And, yes, how? Hai-Jin smiled slightly. That's not something I can share with the Council right now. Operational security. What she didn't tell Thane was that she didn't fully know the plan either. Fleet Admiral Jiho had briefed her on the basics, but the details were classified at the highest level. She knew it involved special forces. She knew it didn't involve fleet combat. Beyond that, she had to trust. 12 hours remaining. Warlord Kran gave an interview to the Galactic News Networks. He sat in his command ship, surrounded by his fleet, looking confident and powerful. The humans are bluffing, he declared. They're a young species playing at being warriors. They'll back down when they see our fleet, and if they don't, we'll crush them and teach the galaxy a lesson about respecting superior military force. The interviewer asked, What about the New Busan victims? Do you regret the civilian casualties? Kran's expression didn't change. Regrettable but necessary. The colony was harboring criminals. We acted within our rights. Back on Earth, every human who saw that interview felt the same cold anger. This wasn't an enemy who felt remorse. This was an enemy who felt entitled, who saw human lives as worthless. Fleet Admiral Jiho received a private communication from Commander Dong Hyun, the leader of humanity's elite special operations force. We're in position, Dong Hyun reported. Assets deployed. Waiting for go order. This closing 41. Dong Hyun reported. Stand by, Jiho replied. 6 hours remaining. The council called an emergency session. They were going to vote on sanctions against humanity if the deadline passed and humans took military action. It was an unprecedented move. The council had never preemptively sanctioned a member species. Councillor Mora objected. We're punishing them before they've done anything. This is wrong. We're preventing a war, Councillor Thane argued. If humanity knows they'll face immediate consequences, perhaps they'll reconsider. The vote was 39-8. Sanctions approved. Hee-Jin received the news while standing in front of the memorial wall she had created, 847 names etched in light. She read through them again. Slowly. Minjae. Hana, J1, all of them. I'm sorry, she whispered. I tried to make them understand. Her communicator buzzed. Fleet Admiral Jiho. Ambassador. You need to make one final broadcast, he said. Tell the galaxy exactly what we're doing and why. No politics. No diplomacy. Just the truth. Hee-Jin arranged for access to the Council's public channels. Every species in the galaxy could watch if they wanted to. Most did. Curiosity about the strange humans who refused to negotiate was high. She stood before the camera. No prepared speech. No script. Just her and the truth. My name is Hee-Jin. I represent humanity on the Galactic Council. In a few hours, the deadline we set will expire. I want to explain why we set it and what happens next. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Humanity is not a warlike species. Not anymore. We spent thousands of years fighting each other, and we nearly destroyed ourselves. We learned that violence only creates more violence. That war only creates more war. We learned to value peace. Another pause. But we also learned something else. We learned that peace without justice is just submission. That accepting evil because fighting it is hard makes us complicit in that evil. We learned this lesson in blood and fire and tears. The camera showed her face clearly. She wasn't crying, but her eyes were bright. 847 humans were murdered. Not in a war, not in a territorial dispute, not in self-defense. They were murdered to send a message, to show that the Vracath Empire could kill with impunity, that human lives were worthless, that our protection meant nothing. She looked directly at the camera. We are not going to negotiate with the people who did this. We are not going to accept apologies and money in exchange for the lives of children. We are going to bring them to justice. We are going to prove that human lives matter, that our word means something, that when we say never again, we mean it. The broadcast ended. The galaxy waited. 1 hour remaining. In the war room, Fleet Admiral Ji-Ho gave the order. Execute Operation Reckoning. The galaxy expected a battle. They expected human warships to cross the border into Vracath space. They expected explosions, casualties, the kind of fleet engagement that historians would debate for centuries. They expected war. They got something very different. Captain Wu Jin commanded one of humanity's newest stealth ships. It was small, barely large enough for a crew of 20. It didn't carry heavy weapons or thick armor. What it did carry was technology. The Council didn't know. Humans had developed a cloaking system that bent light and sensor waves around the hull, making the ship effectively invisible. We're passing through the Vracath outer perimeter, his pilot reported. No reaction. They don't see us. Wu Jin checked his display. 15 other stealth ships were moving through Vracath space right now, each one heading toward a different target. They had been planning this operation for 6 hours. Commander Dong-hyun and his Special Forces team had spent that time memorizing layouts, studying patterns, preparing for every possible scenario. Target in range, the tactical officer said. Warlord Kran's flagship. He's in his command center. Deploy the team, Wu Jin ordered. In the ship's deployment bay, Commander Dong-hyun and his team checked their gear one final time. They wore combat suits that could survive in vacuum, equipped with non-lethal weapons and extraction tools. Their mission was simple. Get in. Grab Kran. Get out. No casualties, if possible. Remember, Dong-hyun said to his team, we're not here to kill. We're here to arrest. But if they force our hand, we respond appropriately. The team nodded. They were all veterans, all volunteers. They knew what they were doing. The stealth ship positioned itself directly beneath Kran's flagship. In the command center of the Vracath ship, alarms suddenly began screaming. The Vracath crew rushed to their stations, confused and alarmed. Sir, we're detecting a massive energy surge, a sensor operator reported. Warlord Kran stood from his command chair. From where? I don't know. It's coming from inside the ship. Dong-hyun's team materialized in the corridor outside Kran's command center. They had used a short-range teleporter, another technology the Council didn't know about. The Vracath guards stared in shock for half a second before reaching for their weapons. Stand down, Dong-hyun ordered in translated Vracath. We are here for Warlord Kran only. Do not interfere. The guards opened fire. Dong-hyun's team responded with precision. Non-lethal pulse weapons dropped the guards without killing them. The team moved forward, breaching the command center door with cutting tools. Inside, Kran stood surrounded by his officers. He looked more surprised than afraid. Impossible, he breathed. You can't be here. Our fleet would have detected. Warlord Kran, Dong-hyun interrupted. You are under arrest for crimes against sapient life. Specifically, the murder of 847 human civilians on New Busan. You will be transported to Earth to face trial. Kran laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. You think you can just walk onto my ship and take me? We have 200 warships. Actually, Dong-hyun said calmly, you don't, not anymore. At that exact moment, across Vracath space, tech specialist Nari was executing her part of the operation. She worked from a bunker deep inside Earth's most secure facility, her fingers flying across holographic keyboards. The Vracath military network was sophisticated but not impenetrable. Not when you had been studying it for 6 months. Not when you had help from the most advanced AI humanity had ever built. Initiating lockdown protocols, Nari reported. 3, 2, 1. Now, across the Vracath Empire, every military ship suddenly lost control of its weapons systems. Fire control went dark. Missile tubes locked. Energy weapons powered down. The Vracath fleet was still mobile, could still maneuver, but they couldn't fire a single shot. What's happening? Vracath captains demanded across hundreds of ships. Their crews worked frantically, trying to override the lockdown. Nothing worked. The systems were encrypted with quantum locks that would take years to break. On the council station, observers watched in amazement as humanity's plan unfolded. The 40 human warships at the border hadn't moved. They just sat there, silent and still. But across Vracath space, chaos erupted. They're not fighting, Counselor Thane said in disbelief. They're extracting. 16 Special Forces teams were moving simultaneously. Each one targeted a specific Vracath officer who had been present at New Busan. They appeared, made their arrests, and disappeared before the Vracath military could respond. The entire operation took 4 hours. 4 hours to pull 23 individuals from various locations across an empire of billions. 0 civilian casualties. 0 fleet combat. Just surgical precision. Warlord Cran found himself in a holding cell on a human ship, still not quite believing what had happened. One moment he had been in command of the most powerful fleet in this sector. The next, he was a prisoner. This is an act of war, he told his captors. Commander Dong Hyun looked at him through the cell's transparent wall. No, this is an arrest. If we wanted war, your flagship would be debris, and your crew would be dead. Instead, they're alive and unharmed. We disabled your weapons to prevent unnecessary casualties. We will release control of your fleet once you're in custody on Earth. The Council will never allow this. The Council can file whatever complaints they want. We don't answer to them on matters of justice. Back on the Council station, the emergency session had turned into something else entirely. Instead of watching a war, they were watching a demonstration of capability that terrified everyone. How did they do this? One counselor demanded. How did they bypass our sensor networks? How did they penetrate Vracath space without detection? How did they take control of an entire fleet? High Arbiter Vex processed the data. The humans have been developing military technology in secret. Technology beyond what they've shared with the Council. Counselor Mora spoke quietly. We assumed because they're young, they're primitive. We were wrong. Ambassador Haijin stood before the Council. She looked exhausted but satisfied. The operation is complete, she announced. 23 Vracath military officers are in human custody. They will face trial on Earth for their crimes. Any species wishing to observe the proceedings is welcome. You attacked a council member, Counselor Thane protested. You violated their sovereignty. We arrested criminals, Haijin corrected. We didn't invade their territory. We didn't attack their civilians. We didn't destroy their infrastructure. We simply took the individuals responsible for mass murder into custody. The Vracath fleet will be released from lockdown once the accused are safely on Earth. We disabled their weapons to prevent unnecessary conflict. Not to conquer them, they'll have full control back within 24 hours. One of the predator species spoke up. You're setting a dangerous precedent. If any species can ignore Council authority and take unilateral action, we're setting a necessary precedent, Haijin interrupted. That some crimes are beyond mediation. That mass murder isn't a negotiating point. That justice matters. The council chamber erupted in argument again. Some species were outraged, some were thoughtful. The predator species were notably quiet, doing calculations in their heads about what humanity's demonstrated capabilities meant for their own plans. Counselor Thane called for order. Regardless of your success, humanity has violated council protocols. The sanctions vote can proceed as planned, Haijin agreed. If the council wants to punish us for refusing to negotiate with child murderers, that's your choice. We'll accept whatever consequences come. Fleet Admiral Ji-ho watched from Earth as public broadcasts showed the arrested Vracath officers being transferred to maximum security facilities. They would face trial in 30 days. Every charge would be proven with evidence. Every victim would be named. The galaxy would watch and learn what human justice looked like. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're receiving thousands of messages from across the galaxy." "What kind of messages?" "All kinds. Some condemning us, some supporting us, but a lot of them are requests." "Requests for what?" "For help. Smaller species asking if humanity would apply the same justice on their behalf. They're asking us to protect them from aggressor species." Ji-ho sat back in his chair. That was something they hadn't expected. They'd thought this might isolate humanity. Instead, it seemed to be showing other species that there was an alternative to the Council's endless mediation. Dr. Subin appeared on his screen. "Admiral, I've been analyzing the galactic response. Do you know what's happening? Tell me, for 10,000 years, the Council has maintained peace through mediation. But that peace was built on the assumption that everything is negotiable, that every crime can be compensated, every conflict resolved with compromise. What we just did challenged that entire system. And half the galaxy is terrified. Not because we're militarily strong, though we clearly are, but because we're introducing a new variable into their calculations. Morality. The idea that some things are simply wrong, regardless of cultural context." Ji-ho nodded slowly. "The predator species are rethinking their strategies." "Exactly. They've been testing boundaries for millennia. Push too far, pay some compensation, move on. Now they have to consider that humanity might not play by those rules, that we might actually hold them accountable." On the Council station, the sanctions vote proceeded. 39 species voted to impose economic and diplomatic restrictions on humanity. 8 voted against. It was a clear majority. Ambassador He-jin accepted the decision with grace. "We understand the Council's position. We will comply with the sanctions while maintaining our principles." As she left the chamber, Counselor Mora approached her privately. "That was the most impressive display of military capability I've seen in 200 years, the Delphinian said quietly. "And the most frightening." "Why frightening?" He-jin asked. "Because you did it all without hatred, without anger. Just cold, precise execution of justice. That's what scares them. The predators can understand conquest. They can't understand principle backed by overwhelming competence." He-jin smiled slightly. "We're not trying to scare anyone." "I know. That makes it worse. You really mean everything you say." "Never again isn't a slogan for you. It's a promise." "Yes," He-jin agreed. "It is." 6 months had passed since the arrests. The trial was over. The courtroom on Earth had been specially built for this occasion. It was large enough to accommodate observers from dozens of species who wanted to witness human justice firsthand. Cameras broadcast every moment to 200 billion beings across the galaxy. Judge Min-soo, a severe woman with silver hair, read the verdict in a clear, steady voice. "On all counts of crimes against sapient life, we find the defendants guilty. The evidence is overwhelming and undisputed. The deliberate targeting of civilians, including children, constitutes the gravest violation of the laws we have established to govern warfare and conflict." She looked at the 23 Vracath officers sitting in the defendants section. Warlord Kran sat among them, no longer looking smug. The court sentences each defendant to life imprisonment, without possibility of parole. They will be held in secure facilities and treated humanely, in accordance with human law. This is not revenge. This is justice. The galaxy watched and processed. The trial had been meticulous. Every victim named. Every piece of evidence examined. The defendants had been given lawyers, translators, every right that human law afforded. It had taken 6 months, but no one could claim the process wasn't fair. What surprised many species was that the defendants weren't executed. Human law had abolished the death penalty 2 centuries ago, even for the worst crimes. Life in prison was the maximum sentence. "They're keeping them alive?" one alien observer asked in confusion. "Why?" Dr. Subin, who had attended every day of the trial, explained patiently. Because we're not interested in revenge. We're interested in establishing that certain acts have consequences. That you can't murder children and walk away. But we're also interested in showing that justice doesn't require cruelty. The Vrakith Empire's response to the trial was complicated. Their government had fallen apart in the months following the arrests. When the full evidence of the New Busan massacre became public, many Vrakith citizens were horrified. They hadn't known. Their media had reported it as a necessary military action against criminal elements. A new government had taken control. One that prosecuted the old regime's supporters under Vrakith law. They issued formal apologies. They paid reparations not in credits but in labor. Vrakith engineers helped rebuild New Busan, working alongside human colonists. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. On the Galactic Council, things had changed in ways both subtle and profound. Councillor Mora stood before the assembly, presenting what she called the New Busan Protocols, a framework that distinguished between different types of conflict. For 10,000 years, we have treated all conflicts the same, she explained. A trade dispute and a massacre were both subject to mediation. But humanity has shown us something important. Some acts cannot be mediated. Some crimes against sapient life must be treated as just that, crimes. The debate lasted for weeks. Species argued about definitions, about cultural differences, about sovereignty. But slowly, a consensus emerged. The Council established a new category of violations: crimes against sapient life. These would be investigated by a new division, separate from the mediation process. Ambassador He-jin was offered the position of director. She almost refused after 6 months of sanctions. Earth was still somewhat isolated from the galactic community, but Fleet Admiral Jiho convinced her to accept. They need to learn, he told her. And we need to teach them. Not through force, but through example. So He-jin became the first director of the Council's Justice Division. It was slow work. Many species resisted the idea that there were universal moral standards. But others, especially the smaller species who had suffered at the hands of predatory neighbors, supported the change enthusiastically. The predator species watched and calculated. The larger ones, like the Vrakith, had seen what happened when you crossed certain lines with humans. The smaller, aggressive species tested boundaries more carefully now. There was an incident 4 months after the trial. A pirate group attacked a mining colony belonging to a species called the Ventari. The Ventari were peaceful traders with no military. They sent a distress call to the Council. The call was also received by Captain Tae-min's patrol fleet. They're asking for mediation, Lieutenant Yuna reported. Standard procedure. How long will mediation take? Tae-min asked. Weeks, maybe months. The pirates will be long gone by then. Tae-min thought about New Busan. About the children who had died while everyone followed proper procedures. Send a message to the pirates, he said. Inform them that they have 1 hour to release all hostages and surrender to Ventari authorities. If they refuse, we will extract the hostages by force. Sir, we don't have authorization from the Council. We don't need it. We're not starting a war. We're protecting civilians. The pirates, having heard what happened to the Vrakith, calculated their odds. They released the hostages and fled. No shots were fired. The Council protested human overreach. Ambassador He-jin responded calmly. We prevented a crime against sapient life. That's now Council policy, isn't it? It became a pattern. Human ships didn't conquer. They didn't build an empire. But when they encountered situations where civilians were in danger, they acted. Sometimes with approval, sometimes without. Always with precision. Always with restraint. Slowly, the galaxy began to understand what humanity meant by never again. Captain Tae-min stood on New Busan a year after the massacre. The colony had been rebuilt. New families had moved in. Children played in streets that had once been charred ruins. In the center of the colony stood a memorial. 847 stars projected into the sky, 1 for each victim. Their names were engraved on a wall of black stone. Min Jae. Hana. J1. All of them. We remember. Read the inscription. We will always remember. And we will never let it happen again. A young boy approached Taemin. He couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Are you Captain Taemin? The boy asked. The one who found them? Yes, Taemin said gently. My teacher says you're the reason we have justice. That you didn't let the bad people get away with it. Taemin knelt down to the boy's level. A lot of people made that happen. But yes, we made sure there was justice. Do you know why that's important? The boy thought about it. Because people matter? Exactly. Every single person matters. And when someone hurts people, especially children, there have to be consequences. Always. Fleet Admiral Jiho retired a year after the trial. His replacement was younger. But she had learned from Jiho's example. Human military doctrine now included a new principle. Proportional justice. Use the minimum force necessary. Protect civilians at all costs. Never negotiate with those who commit crimes against sapient life. Dr. Subin gave a lecture at the Galactic Academy 5 years after New Busan. The room was packed with students from 40 different species, all trying to understand human morality. You asked me once why humans care so much about children, she said to the class. The simple answer is that every one of us was a child once. We remember being vulnerable, being dependent on adults to protect us. When we see children harmed, we see ourselves. We see our own children. We see the future being destroyed. A student raised a tentacle. But other species have children too. Why don't they react the same way? Some do, Subin acknowledged. But humans have a unique history. We nearly destroyed ourselves. We built weapons that could end all life on Earth. We committed atrocities that we're still ashamed of. We learned, through terrible experience, that protecting the innocent isn't just about emotion. It's about survival. She pulled up an image of old Earth. Cities in ruins. Battlefields. The aftermath of wars that killed millions. We learned that when you allow evil to prosper, when you negotiate away justice for convenience, you create a world where evil becomes normal. Where the strong prey on the weak, and everyone accepts it. We decided we would never accept that again. Not on Earth. Not in space. Not anywhere, another student asked. But isn't that imposing your values on other species? Maybe, Subin agreed. But is it imposing our values to say that murdering children is wrong? Is it cultural imperialism to protect the innocent? Some things transcend culture. Some things are simply right or wrong, no matter what species you are. The debate continued for hours. Not everyone agreed. Some species still believed everything was relative. But others nodded thoughtfully, beginning to understand. 10 years after New Busan, the Galactic Council looked very different. The Justice Division had investigated 24 major incidents. Some resulted in arrests, some in sanctions, a few in military intervention by a coalition of species who believed in the new principles. The predator species were quieter now. Oh, there were still conflicts, still territorial disputes and trade wars. But the deliberate targeting of civilians had become rare. The cost-benefit calculation had changed. The galaxy had learned that some species would hold you accountable. Ambassador He-jin, now in her 60s, stood before the council one last time before her retirement. When humanity joined the Galactic Council, we were naive, she said. We thought everyone valued life the way we did. We thought justice was universal. We learned we were wrong. She paused, looking at the assembled representatives. But we also learned that values can spread. That principle, backed by capability, can change minds. Not through conquest, but through example. We showed the galaxy that it's possible to stand for something, to draw a line and mean it, to say never again and actually enforce it. Councillor Thane, much older now but still mediating, spoke up. You changed us, Ambassador. For better or worse, humanity has changed the Council. I hope for better, He-jin said. We didn't want to change you. We just wanted to stop people from murdering children and getting away with it. You did more than that, Councillor Mora added. You reminded us that peace without justice is just another form of tyranny. After the session, Heijin received a message. It was from a remote colony on the Galactic Rim. A species she'd never heard of. Facing threats from pirates. We heard what humans did to the Vrakeath, the message read. We heard about New Busan, and how you refused to negotiate with murderers. We're asking for your help. Not your military. Your justice. Heijin forwarded the message to the Justice Division with a smile. Someone else would handle it now. The next generation of humans and aliens working together to establish something new in the galaxy. She thought about that burned classroom on New Busan. About the toy rabbit. About 847 names. We kept our promise, she whispered. We didn't let them get away with it. And we made sure it matters. Across the galaxy, in the dark corners where violence used to hide unchallenged, a new warning spread, whispered in 1,000 languages, on 1,000 worlds. The humans don't negotiate with murderers, they don't threaten, they don't bluff, they just act, and they never forget. For those who preyed on the innocent, that warning changed everything. For those who needed protection, it offered hope, and for humanity, it was a promise kept. Never again. Not on Earth. Not in space. Not anywhere. The galaxy had learned. Some lessons are written in blood. But once learned, they're never forgotten.